studies that are conducted, the aim is to predict behavior. If someone is presented with this stimuli, their behavior will be like this. If you hear a gunshot, everyone will be running away. That's predicted behavior. So the aim is just to predict behavior. If you are presented with this stimuli, what will happen? If someone experiences heartbreak, what will happen? So they just predict behavior. That maybe after a heartbreak, someone will be stressed, will be depressed. So they just predict behavior. So they predict behavior by understanding the causes. But as I said, the challenge is, you experience a heartbreak, but due to the other factors, the behavior can be different. Other people, they will be even happy, even after maybe they loved that person. You find person A is okay after the heartbreak. Maybe due to people surrounding that person, providing encouragement, cannot be stressed or depressed. But for someone, maybe because they are lonely, for example. So for them, they just try to predict behavior. But it doesn't mean all the times things will be like such. So making predictions is difficult because people vary and respond differently to different situations. We respond differently. If we lose a parent, the way I can respond or the way someone can respond can be different. But psychologists would try just to predict. If someone loses a parent, like, how can this person respond to this? How will this person behave? That's why if we see people crying, stressed, whatever, not eating, or when someone is stressed, some other people eat, other people will not eat. Some people spend a sleepless night if they are stressed or depressed. Other people, they will sleep the whole night. So it's very difficult to make these predictions. But for psychology, they just try to make those predictions. It means the majority of the cases will exhibit that kind of behavior, but not everyone, because of the differences. Personal differences can be genetic, physical, psychological. So we will portray different behaviors. Are we moving together? Lilimozi? Awanka tosheba. People are responding. So individual differences are variations among people on physical, psychological dimensions. For example, most people experience negative most people experience negative events at some point in time. Some people handle these challenges, while other people, they develop symptoms of depression. If you meet challenges in life, loss of someone, maybe loss of a loved one, divorce, whatever, people will respond to this differently or will handle this challenge differently. For other people, that's why you see other people just after a heartbreak, they commit suicide. For other people, they'll be okay. Zimatega? Oh, useke? Kwamba sokumunyoza muchuja kwamba ari kwesese kuti aone koiba kuti ukhabura. Anyway, that was a very good idea. We should break up, but other people, they do not handle it successfully. It becomes difficult for them to handle such situations. So because of such individual differences, we cannot always predict who will become aggressive or who will perform based on the job. Sometimes by just looking at people, we may think maybe this one is better, but we have some individual differences. So due to individual differences that we have, even when on a certain job position, some people, maybe they may perform better than others. And predictions made by psychologists are just probabilities. You get my point? So they use predictions. These are just probabilities. It doesn't mean everyone will behave that way. Some people would respond differently. Sometimes you'll be surprised. After a heartbreak, someone goes out, enjoy, eat, go out, eat out. they are okay. They'll move on faster. But for other people, they reach depression stage because we have individual differences and we handle our issues differently. For example, we can say people who score higher on an intelligence test will on average do better in school. But however, we cannot make very accurate predictions about exactly how anyone will perform. Those are just predictions. And there is another reason why we are looking at challenges of doing psychological investigations like studies. So there is an additional reason so that predictions are difficult because human behavior is influenced by more than one variable at a time. Behavior is influenced by more than one variable at a time. And these variables may influence people differently. We may have different variables. For example, intelligence performance in school. What if that time we did not study hard and you feel like due to different variables, it may not be like your behavior may not only be attributed to one stimulus. Sometimes maybe where you came from, how you were raised, will lead to higher performance. So some people just maybe it's just genetic, or maybe because this person studies hard will pass better. But there might be other variables or other factors that affect behavior. So to isolate sometimes which variable or which factor led the person to act in that way might be difficult when we talk of behavior. For instance, depression is caused by genetic factors, personal factors, and cultural factors. Depression, the causes can be genetic, yeah. The causes of depression can be genetic, personal, and cultural factors. So someone will be in depression, maybe you are thinking, we think it's personal, maybe it's something genetic to do with genetic or culture. That's why it's tough. So sometimes you just draw conclusions to say, maybe it's personal. In fact, maybe you go to that person, try to find out the real cause of depression. They'll tell you, I don't have any problem. Then you'll be like, no, you are hiding. Just maybe the cause is something to do with genetics, the depression. So you should always be skeptical about people who attempt to explain important human behavior such as violence, depression, in terms of a single cause. If someone just say this behavior is caused by this, you need to be skeptical about that behavior. What about other factors surrounding it? Even when we're doing agricultural experiments, we say, that's why you replicate and do so many trials. Just trying to isolate which factor. Because you can say maybe the growth of a certain plant, maybe you have 2 plots, is attributed to fertilizer application because I applied this kind of fertilizer. Maybe the soil was fertile, or maybe the other land, the soil is not good. That's why when they are doing such experiment, they try to rule out everything so that you come up with a single cause or the real cause or the real the real cause of that change. If it's maybe it's fertilizer, or maybe it's exposure to sunlight, or maybe it's spacing. That's why you find but they're trying to rule out. So it's the same with behavior. We cannot easily rule out the cause because there are also other factors that affect how people will behave or how people will act. Are we together? So these multiple causes are not independent of one another, and one cause is present, other causes tend to be present as well. They are not independent, but they're dependent on one another. When one cause is there, you find the other cause is also there in most cases. So that's why we are saying it's just predicting. They use probability that if someone exposed to this stimuli will respond in this way. But it's not always that everyone will respond in that manner. So it is difficult to pinpoint which cause or causes are operating at that point in time. For instance, some people may be depressed because of biological imbalances in neurotransmitters in the brain. Some people may be depressed because of biological imbalances in neurotransmitters in the brain. So many causes of like behaviors that we exhibit. It's not attributed only to one single cause. So psychology is a scientific study of mind and behavior. I think we've discussed this about scientific study of the mind and behavior. You are trying to see what is in your mind, what is a person's mind and how they are behaving. So the big challenge is what someone is thinking, you cannot easily see. That's why they just use predictions. Like whatever a person is thinking, or maybe you are presented with a stimuli, then whatever will be thinking from that time, you cannot really tell. But what we see is the behavior, how a person is behaving. Sometimes by just looking at how someone is behaving, you can tell this person is stressed or depressed. You can tell by just looking at how the person is looking. Maybe lack of interest or lack of concentration. You are trying to talk to that person, but maybe not responding, looking unresponsive. So sometimes you just tell. So usually they just predict. So because of those theory, because of those predictions, that's what we use even now. When you see someone is quiet or silent or losing interest or lack of focus, you'll be asking, what's the problem? You try to ask those people. So, though it is easy to think that everyday situations have common sense answers, we think everyday situations have common sense answers. Scientific studies have found that people are not always as good as predicting outcomes as they think they are. So, even though in everyday situations we think we have common sense answers, this is just common sense. But there are situations that you cannot easily predict the outcome. You can use your common sense, but you may realize it's not what you are thinking in behavior. Any questions so far? Or comment? Mina yankulego tisingopitirira? Yeah. That's genetic. Personal factors, eh? That's what we focus on. When we see someone is depressed, what do we think? Personal factors. Maybe it's the issue of relationship, losing someone died. Yeah, so there are a lot of things that can lead to depression. It's difficult because, as we said, psychology is a study of the mind. So these people, they are trying just to study the mind, but what I'm thinking, and someone really see or predict what I'm thinking. That's the challenge. That's why usually they just try to associate stimulus and behavior. So most conclusions be like, if people are presented with this stimuli, they will behave this way. As such, there are some of these challenges come in. It's not only A that can lead to B, but A, B, C can also lead to C, or multiple factors which can lead to C. So scientific study, like psychological study, is not easy. It's not easy. I think if you go along, I don't know the other chapters. You know, psychology, as I said, psychology sometimes is funny. The things they'll be talking. And you may not even argue. Sometimes we can argue because from the use of common sense, we just use common sense sometimes to argue. And when they're coming up with this, some of these theories. So let's look at the biological foundations of behavior. Biological foundations of behavior. As we said, behavior also has biological foundations. There is that relationship because whatever we are thinking comes from the brain. So the brain is the biological part of a person. So we have the biological part of a person. We discussed of neurotransmitters, like the nervous system, affecting how we act. Because the brain, which is biological part of a human being, will tell you how you should act. Will tell you, will send the messages maybe to the muscles to start running. If you are presented with some stimuli and you're afraid, the brain will tell the body to start running, like then you start running away from that stimuli. So let's look at biological foundations of behavior. So we'll be discussing the brain, neurons, transmitters, nervous system, the genetic influence on human behavior. What is the nervous system? This one will be like review. Nervous system. Nervous system, the body's communication network. The nervous system is the body's communication network, more especially when we are defining it in terms of the field, the perspective, psychological perspective, is a communication, body's communication network. It tries to communicate what is in your mind, depending on what you have been presented with, like a stimulus, to how you respond. So the nervous system, its function is often compared to the country's telephone system or the internet. The nervous system allows any part of the body to be in contact with any other part of the body within a fraction of a second. The nervous system allows any part of the body to be in contact with or other parts within seconds, because the nervous system, on top of the brain, the neural, the transmitters, will be sending messages within seconds. So it's like communication between there is a communication between the physical part and the psychological part. As I said, if you want to run, it will be messages sent to the muscles that will cause you to start running. So nervous system, though sophisticated signaling acts as a control network within the body. The nervous system is a control network. And the specialized cells that constitute the functional units of the nervous system are the neurons, specialized cells. that constitutes the functional units of the nervous system, the neurons. So the neurons are responsible for receiving messages or information and also providing responses to changes. The neurons will be receiving, if you are presented with a stimuli, they be responsible for receiving those messages to your brain and then providing responses to the changes in the environment. If there's anything that there's a change in the environment, it will be the neurons receiving information and sending out information. So it is estimated that the human body, the human nervous system, is composed of more than 100 billion neurons, which are linked together in a highly intricate manner. More than 100 billion neurons. So various parts of the nervous system are interconnected. The nervous system, the various parts of the brain, the neurons, the neurotransmitters, they are connected. So the nervous system is broadly classified into two anatomical divisions, the central nervous system and peripheral nervous system. Do you remember? Central nervous system and peripheral nervous system. Who remembers? You remember? Do you remember the difference between the two? Or you just remember we learned about these two different categories of the nervous system? The peripheral, yeah. What is it? Peripheral.
It's like the nervous system. But when you are just as blood inside muscles.
Just as blood inside muscles. And after the I thought that punzilagari sirichedwa. Or maybe you learned, you forgot, but it will be easier for you maybe when you study. You recall what you learned. So the central nervous system occupies the central axis of the body, and it includes the central axis of the body. It includes spinal cord and the brain. Yeah, the central nervous system occupies the central axis of the body. Unit 2 is more of biology. It's more of biology. So if we go and read biology, we will remember everything. What about the parts of the brain? The three parts of the brain. So all of us, we have forgotten, except that person. Kaika. So the peripheral nervous system is a part of the system which lies outside the central nervous system. And it consists of the peripheral nerves, like the nerves. The nerves are part of the central nervous system. The ganglia associated with them. So the peripheral nerves attached to the brain are called cranial nerves. They are 12, the nervous system. The nerves which are connected to the brain. They are 12. They are in 12 pairs. Cranial nerves, and those attached with the spinal cord are spinal nerves. So we have cranial nerves connected to the brain, and we have spinal nerves which are connected to cranial nerves. Spinal nerves are connected to the spinal cord. So the nerves, the peripheral nerves, which are attached to the brain, are called cranial nerves. And the nerves which are connected to the spinal cord are called spinal nerves. So the spinal nerves, there are 31 pairs, while cranial nerves, there are 12 pairs. Five-minute break, you are too silent. But it's just 30 minutes. We started late. I think it's just about 30, 40 minutes and you're already exhausted. Now you see the benefit of why we study some of these things. Biology, can you pause a bit? Pause, not stop. The first one was anatomical division. We are looking at functional, anatomical, in terms of divisions of the body parts, anatomical division. Now we are looking at the functional division of the nervous system. Anatomical division of the nervous system. So, what are the two anatomical subdivisions? Anatomical divisions that we just discussed. Anatomical divisions of the nerves of the nervous system. What are they? The two that we just discussed before the 5 minutes break. And central nervous system and peripheral nervous system. Those are the anatomical. Anatomy. Anatomy is a biological makeup. So it's like the body parts, like the brain, spinal cord, the neurons and the ganglia somewhere. So those are the anatomical divisions of the nervous system. So now we are looking at the functional divisions of the nervous system. We have somatic nervous system and automatic nervous system. Somatic nervous system and automatic nervous system. So both somatic and automatic nervous system have two divisions. Both somatic and automatic nervous system, they also have two divisions. The sensory division and the motor division. The sensory division, which is for collecting data. Collecting information. The sensory division and the motor division for executing data. So let's look at the somatic nervous system. So the sensory division of the somatic nervous system collects information about changes that takes place in the external environment. The somatic nervous system collects information about the changes that takes place in the external environment and interprets the meaning of these changes. So now I'm sure you are trying to relate to psychology and talking of the thinking, the mind, the process that happens there. So now I'm sure you relate, why are we learning this? Something which is looking like biology. You need to try to link or to marry the two. So the somatic nervous system will collect information about the external changes in the environment and try to interpret the meaning of these changes. So it will collect this information, this change in the environment or the outside the environment. So the sensory division, as I said, both somatic and automatic nervous system, they also have two divisions, the sensory division and the motor division. So the somatic nervous system and the automatic nervous system, they also have two divisions, the sensory and the motor division, sensory division and the motor division. So the sensory, something to do with the senses, but mainly the motor do with action, the motor division. So this, as I said, the somatic nervous system collects information about the changes in the environment and interprets those changes. And the sensory division of the somatic nervous system consists of the sensory receptors that receive stimulus. The sensory division of the somatic nervous system consists of sensory receptors that receives information or receives stimulus from the external environment. And a stimulus is a change in the environment of sufficient intensity to evoke response. Stimulus is a change in the environment of sufficient intensity that evoke response, because usually if you receive a certain stimulus, definitely you respond. So if there is if you hear some strange sound, it means the sensory receptors will be the ones to receive that stimulus from the external environment. Something that has changed, may, for example, have received or you have heard a strange sound. So this strange sound will evoke response of an organism. As a human being, the response will be running away if you hear some strange sound. Sometimes, or you shout. So the stimulus may be mechanical, chemical, thermal, auditory, or visual. The stimulus may be something to do with mechanical, chemical within the body, like we have the mechanical bag of the body, thermal, temperature, auditory, something you hear, or visual, something you see. So those can be the kind of stimulus. If you see something strange, it means it's the sensory receptors that will receive that kind of information. There's something strange ahead of me. So the afferent neurons that carries impulses from the receptors to the brain and spinal cord, and the part of the brain that primarily deals the part of the brain that primarily deals with the processing of information, the information that you have received, it will be processed in the brain. So the motor, we said the sensory part of the somatic nervous system, you remember, is the one that receives information. So the motor division of the somatic nervous system executes appropriate actions with the help of skeletal muscles in response to the changes in the external environment. The motor division of the somatic system will now execute appropriate actions if it's running. Because if we're talking of running, it means it will be with the help of skeletal muscles. It means messages have been sent to the skeletal muscle to start running. So the somatic also has the, as I said, the motor division is this, the part that helps you, the physical part that helps you to run, like the muscles will help you to run. While the sensory is like the senses, receiving. You just see something. You hear, you feel something. So the motor division, if you see something strange, it will tell you to start running. The messages will be sent with the help of the skeletal muscles. If you see something strange, you run away. So the motor division also coordinates the actions of different skeletal muscles of the body. The motor division of the somatic nervous system also coordinates different actions of the skeletal muscles of the body. Because you have different muscles, we will not go deeper, but you know, when you are running, it means muscles will be moving different directions. So it's the motor division of the somatic nervous system that will tell each muscle to act accordingly. You get my point? Mabalalika atule. Mungu yangana simungu yanko. You comment. If you understand, you comment. If you don't, you say. Yeah. So the skeletal muscles are the effector organs of the somatic nervous system. And the motor division of the somatic nervous system consists of neurons that carry signals away from the brain and the spinal cord to the skeletal muscles. The motor division of the somatic nervous system consists of neurons that will carry these signals from the brain and spinal cord to the skeletal muscles. So these signals, these messages that will be sent from the spinal cord, from the brain, the ones that will tell the skeletal muscles to start running. But there are a lot of processes that happens even for us to run. So a single motor neuron arising in the central nervous system traverses directly to the skeletal muscles without the mediation of the ganglia. And somatic nervous system is under voluntary control. Somatic nervous system is under voluntary control, because if the messages are sent to the muscles, you voluntarily start running away. We know there are some voluntary actions and involuntary actions. Actions that just happens automatically. That's why we have somatic and automatic. Yeah. So the automatic, it means it's involuntary. Whether you like it or not, it just happens. Yeah. The automatic nervous system collects information about the changes that takes place in the internal environment. The first one was collecting from from external environment. The somatic nervous system was collecting information from the external environment. But the automatic nervous system collects information from the internal environment, interprets these changes and guides the actions and gets the plan executed with the help of the smooth muscles. We are talking of skeletal muscles, but here with the help of the smooth muscles and viscera, cardiac muscles and secretory epithelium of glandular tissues. So this is automatic, involuntary. For example, if we talk of circulatory system, do we do anything for the blood to circulate in the body? That's automatic, eh? Yeah. So this one collects information from the internal environment within your body, collects that information and interprets that changes, that kind of information or change in the body, and then it will guide action. So the first one, somatic, is collecting information from the outside environment, and the action is voluntary with the help of the skeletal muscles. But automatic is collecting information from inside your body, interprets it, and then you do action. But this one is involuntary with help of the smooth muscles of the viscera or cardiac muscles, secretory epithelium of glandular tissues. So in other ways, the automatic nervous system is responsible for activities of the organs such as circulation, digestion, excretion, respiration, and reproduction, as well as adrenal medulla. So we cannot voluntarily control digestion, circulatory system, respiratory system. So this is controlled by the automatic, because these systems are automated. We don't do anything. Tikangoja taya. Whatever happens there is the automatic system that tells the right actions to take place. So the central nervous system, this is just a unit summary, not unit, just a summary. The central nervous system, collection of neurons that make up the brain and the spinal cord. And peripheral nervous system, the collection of neurons that links to our skin, our muscles, our glands. This is the peripheral nervous system. So the neurons are specialized cells found in the nervous system. Neurons, specialized cells that transmit information from the brain to the skeletal muscles or to the visceral muscles. These are the neurons that transmit information. So the neurotransmitters relay information chemically from the terminal buttons and across the synapses to the receiving dendrites using a type of lock and key system. I will not go deeper into the neurotransmitters, otherwise you'll get confused if more. So the many different neurotransmitters work together to influence cognition, memory, and behaviors. Many different neurotransmitters, they work together to influence cognition, memory, and behavior. Neurotransmitters. So we have agonists, which are drugs that mimic the actions of neurotransmitters, like the function of the neurotransmitters to influence cognition, memory, and behavior. Sometimes for other people, I think medical field, they use agonists that mimic the actions of neurotransmitters. Whereas antagonists are drugs that block action of neurotransmitters. Eh? Unataka mbagale? What's the topic that we are discussing? Nervous system. So it means you are lost because it's biological foundations of behavior. So we are trying to link how behavior comes in biologically, because if you talk biological, which is the biological part of the body, the brain, the neurotransmitters, neurons, the spinal cord, how is it informing the actions or the behavior that we portray or we exhibit? You see a stimulus, messages are sent in the central nervous system. It tells the somatic nervous system. It tells you how you should respond, whether you need to run or not. So the behavior is coming, the behavior of running is coming because of the messages that were received in the brain. So we're just trying to relate how these the issues of cognition, memory, whatever, how they come in, how like behavior from the mind. So this is the biological foundations of behavior. Because behaviors also depends on how the biological makeup of a person, the brain. As I said, we are all normal here, but if the brain, maybe you were born normal and you had a brain damage, it means your behavior will also change. So this is the biological foundation of behavior. Your behavior change. That's when you know. So someone had an accident which led to brain injury. Now is behaving differently. That's now you see. The way we behave is also related to the biological makeup or physiology of a person. You get the relationship. Mnadaba to biology. So I'm sure you are relating the issue of behavior and the biological part of a human being. As I said, they are related. So we are talking of neurotransmitters which work together to influence cognition, the issue of memory, the behavior. So that's where you see the relationship between the mind, the psychology part, and the biological part of a human being. Another question. You really need to read to understand this. I'm sure she asked, of course she came late, she asked, but I'm sure some of you may be lost as well. Maybe you have been answered because of her question. Maybe you were deeper into biology, you were just thinking biologically, but you also need to think psychologically when you are learning about the central nervous system. So who can try to draw the relationship between the two? Just in summary. The biological part of and the psychological part of a human being. Like what we just learned, how is it relating to psychology? Maybe I should ask what we just learned about the biological foundations of behavior. How is it relating to psychology? Do we have an answer or not? Should we proceed? Okay, let's look at major parts of the brain and their relationship to behavior. Major parts of the brain and their relationship to behavior. So the part of the brain, we have the central core, which is similar to that found in all vertebrates, and its function is eating, sleeping, and breathing, the central core. I think I have figures, but I think you cannot see, the images. So I'm sure when reading, I will send today. Yeah. So since we are not projecting, you cannot see the pictures. Why? How? So we have the central core, the major parts of the brain and their function, the major parts of the brain and their function. So we have the central core, the reticular formation, the reticular, which is made up of groups of nerves and cells that can immediately activate other parts of the brain to produce general body arousal. This is the reticular formation, the major part of the brain. Difficult. Yeah. So the reticular formation is made up of a group of nerve cells that can immediately activate other parts to produce general body arousal. This is the reticular formation. So, for example, if we are startled by a loud noise, the reticular formation prompts us to respond. Will prompt us to respond, the reticular formation. So the reticular formation, as well as sleeping by guarding us from disturbing background noises. So I think a good example is when I said when you are startled with a loud noise. So the reticular formation will prompt you to respond. This major part of the body, the reticular formation, will prompt us to respond when you are presented with a loud sound. So what prompts you to respond is the reticular formation. We have the cerebellum, which enables us to walk straight and control body balance. Cerebellum. Its function is to enable us to walk straight and control body balance. This is done by the cerebellum. So it constantly monitors feedback from the muscles to coordinate their placement, movement, and coordination. The cerebellum. So I asked you a question about the relationship between the two, because if I'm to ask, I will not ask you about the biology, but the relationship. Because we are not learning biology. I will not say mention parts of the brain or draw a brain or functions of a brain, unless if it's related to what we are learning, issues of behavior. You get my point? So that question, it was very paramount for us. He said no one wanted to respond to it. So no, someone said we can go on. I asked a question. One of you said we can go ahead. At the end, I'll tell you the question. But all what matters is that relationship between the physical, the biological setup of a human being and the behavior, the relationship. How is the biological makeup of a human being influencing behavior? So this is, that's why I said we need to get the relationship, because these other parts are just trying us, as we are describing these other parts, trying us to relate, to understand. If we say behavior, how is this behavior of running, how is it coming about? It's because of those messages. So get more of the message of this relationship of and behavior. How is the behavior coming in? So as I said, the cerebellum helps you to, enables us to walk straight and control the body balance, and it constantly monitors feedback from the muscles to coordinate their placement, movement, and coordination. So for you to walk straight is because of the cerebellum. The messages sent to the muscles to make you walk straight. So drinking too much alcohol affects the activity of the brain, leading to the person to stagger. You see how it is affecting your behavior? You'll be staggering because too much alcohol will affect the activity of the cerebellum. So if you drink too much, you start staggering. So people staggering, they do it deliberately. It's because the cerebellum is affected by the alcohol. Yeah. So we have the thalamus. Thalamus. It is the station for messages coming from the eyes, ears, skin, and communicated upward to higher parts of the brain. Station for the messages, the thalamus is the station for the messages coming from the eyes, ears, skin, and is communicated to the higher parts of the brain. And it integrates and sort out information from higher parts of the brain and sends to the cerebellum and medulla. It's a station for messages from the eyes, ears, and the skin, and then it communicates upward to the higher parts of the brain, and then it integrates and sorts out that information from the higher parts of the brain. Integrates and sort out. So we have the hypothalamus, which is located just below the thalamus, and it helps to maintain balanced internal environment. The hypothalamus, which lies just below the thalamus, helps to maintain a balanced internal environment, and it regulates such behaviors as eating, drinking, sexual behaviors, aggression, and nurturers of offsprings. The hypothalamus. It regulates behaviors such as sexual behaviors, eating, drinking, aggression. This is done by the hypothalamus. So you can relate these parts of the nervous system or the biological makeup to how we are acting, because it's the hypothalamus that will regulate the behaviors of eating, drinking, or even sexual behaviors. The cerebral cortex, it is part of the brain that distinguishes humankind from all other animals. It is part of the brain that distinguishes humankind from all other animals. That's why we are human beings. We are different from from all other animals. This is because of cerebral cortex. This is a unique function of the brain that allows human beings to think, evaluate, and make complex judgments. This is the part of the brain that makes one to think, evaluate, and make complex judgments that are principally located in the cerebral cortex. So that's the unique function of the cerebral cortex. We are thinking because of cerebral cortex, which makes us different from animals, because animals, do they think? Evaluate things critically. So that's what makes us different from animals. So it will allow us to think, to evaluate, or make complex judgments, because we are human beings. Because of this part, it will help us. So the major areas of the cortex, there are three major areas of the cortex. We have the motor area. Motor, meaning what? Motor. Motor. Movement somehow. Reaction, of course, it's reaction, somehow reaction, because you move. So this area is responsible for voluntary movement of particular parts of the body, the motor area of the cerebral cortex. It is responsible for the voluntary movement of a particular part of the body. Every portion of the motor area corresponds to a specific locale within the body, the motor area, responsible for voluntary movement, voluntary movement. The sensory area, it includes three regions corresponding to the senses. The somatic sensory area corresponds to touch and pressure. The auditory corresponds to sight. The sensory area, the somatic sensory area corresponds to touch and pressure. Auditory corresponds to sight. The visual corresponds to sound. Raw sensory inputs from the I see you are confused already. Okay, when you are reading, as I said, when you are reading, try to relate how big these behaviors are coming about. You see a stimulus, you hear. What makes you to start running away? You get my point? So as I say, these parts are just explaining how we go about movement, how we get to start running away. So when you are reading, I say, don't focus on this, but how these parts are making you to behave in a way we are behaving. You get my point? So as I said, major areas of the cortex, the motor, the sensory, and the association areas. So the association areas are generally considered to be site for higher mental processes. Areas of higher mental processes. You see, now we are talking of the mental processes that we are discussing. So these are areas of high mental processes such as thinking, language, memory, and speech. The association areas of the cortex. These are areas of for higher mental processes: thinking, memory, language, speech. So damage to the association